I'd like to welcome everybody to the Sparx Systems YouTube channel today. Great to have everyone here. Welcome, Stephen. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, Scott.
Oh, that's great. I understand that we're going to be looking at custom styles today. So what are custom styles and how do we use them in Enterprise Architect to make our lives easier?
Thanks, Scott. Look, this really is one of my favorite features of the tool, and for reasons that will become obvious as I start modeling. But let's get into it. And as always, we're going to set our perspective. We do that from the top right-hand corner of the application window here. I've been doing some decision modeling earlier today, and now I want to change perspectives to a different perspective. I'm going to choose shared sets and urban parking. So, Scott, in a previous video, we created a small example of a profile in Enterprise Architect, which is specialization of elements that we can create ourselves to help us model a particular domain, and in this case, urban parking. So this is the continuation of our UML series on the UML diagrams and the features of Enterprise Architect, and for an urban digital parking meter system. So let's do that, and let's now look at our toolbox and choose urban parking there. And you'll see we just created two elements as an example, a location and a parking meter. And the parking meter system is all about the meter and also about the location. So let's have a look at where we might put this. In our structural model here, we've got a number of packages, and we had a class test data model. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it into that package, and let's just have a look at doing that now. And we'll click on this one, a new package from the browser toolbar, and I'm going to give it the name parking meter location tests. So the background of this, Scott, is that some of the development team are starting to work on some tests that they're running with the parking meter and the locations that people are parking at, and we want to create a model that will enable them to view the type of elements that are involved in these tests. Let's go OK to that. And let's create a new diagram. So we'll go over here and we'll change perspectives again to UML this time. And we'll say structural there. Then we'll create a diagram. Let's call it an object diagram because that's what it is. And we'll say create diagram. Now that's flicked over to the object panel. We can just flick back to our urban parking perspective there. And let's start doing some things for this model. Now we want to put a location here first. So let's drag a location from the browser directly onto this package here. And we can rename it over in the properties window. And we're going to call it you just do that. Get a name for it. And we're going to call it let's call it Ross Helmet. Have a look at that. Ross Helmet Esplanade. So that's the name of the street that we're using for our test data. So that's kind of nice. It is a location. And let's put a parking meter in there as well. We'll drag a parking meter into that one as well. And let's give this one a name as well. Let's leave that as the parking meter there, and we'll drop another one on there as well. We'll do a little bit of modeling first, Scott, and then see what we're going to do here. Now, what we're going to do is drop this Ross Helmet Esplanade onto the diagram, and we're going to drop it on as an instance in this case. And the reason why we're doing that is because a street, as you know, has got two sides, and so let's call this the east side of that street. And notice that that's there. I'm going to make the street a little bit longer because that's what we're going to do here. We're going to make this long. Now, I want to drop a parking meter onto that as well. So let's do that. And I'll drop my parking meter here. Let's drop it over here for a minute. And I want an instance of that as well. And I'm going to call it parking meter, 044 dash digital meter dash A. It's an A type of meter. Now that's all standard things, Scott. I look at that and I think, yes, that's nice. Then my parking meter probably, is here somewhere. So what I'll do is I'm going to change this this diagram into this custom drawing style. We can see what happens then. So over here in the properties window for the diagram, I can choose custom style. Now you notice that that's changed the diagram a little bit.
It changed the lines, the line color, all sorts of things. So
yeah, it did. It did indeed. I'm just resizing this element here a little bit. Now, what's popped up as well is this little icon down at the bottom of the elements. Let's have a look at that. I'm going to click on that icon, and you see a little menu pops up. Now, let's have a very quick look at these before we do anything. So I can change the shape of the element, which I couldn't do in the standard presentation. I can change the transparency of the element as well. I can change the location of the name and the stereotype to different positions, and I can also change the orientation of that name to be vertically clockwise or vertically anti-clockwise. Very useful in some circumstances where you've got elements that are shaped a particular way. I can also put an icon onto this element and change both its size, its position, and the padding. And I can also change the element border and the what's called stacks. So this is like you imagine, elements that are stacked on top of each other as though there were, a number of them, and the direction of that. Let's just go and look at a couple of these things. So for this one here, I'm going to change this to a rounded rectangle. So now I've got a rounded rectangle. Now I'm going to change, let's change the position, that text. I don't want that East Side Ross Helmet X Esplanade in the middle of that, element. So I'm going to go top left. And you can see there it's popped up into the top left. Just notice that I've misspelled that element, but that's okay. We'll come back to that and change that at a different time. So I'm sure what I'll do is I'll change it now and watch what happens. Should be spelt with an S.
Yeah.
You notice the diagram.
So you've made the change, but you don't have to go through and rename it if you've used it on 50 diagrams, for example.
Exactly right, Scott. And that's why, I'm usually very careful with spelling, but I'm not very worried about it because, we're all human, we make mistakes, and the tool takes care of all that for you, updates all of the elements and all of the instances of the elements wherever they are. So we did a couple of things. We changed it to a rounded rectangle. It's got a softer appearance. We changed the position of this one. And what I might do now, Scott, is I'm going to apply some colors. So I could do it from, from this one here. So I could apply a color there and I'll say that's the color. And I'm going to change the border color as well and make that into a kind of more striking thing there. So I've got that done. And notice that my parking meter hasn't changed because I want to look at that differently. But there's my parking meter. Now I want to make that a little bit larger because it's a significant piece of infrastructure, and I'm going to put that there. Now I'm going to change some of the aspects of this. I don't want that one to be the rounded rectangle, but I do want to change the color, so I'm going to use this one again, and I'll do the fill color there, and I'll do it as a slightly darker color. There we go. And what I also want to do is to show you the icon that we talked about a little bit earlier. Let's just change that to a slightly different color. There we go. It's a bit darker and more obvious. So what I can do now is I want to look at putting an icon on, and we had some features here to talk about the size of the icons, but I first need to drag an icon from the browser. Now I've created in our image library here, I've just created the parking meter, and what I can do is drag that onto that element. I've got a number of options: set as icon, set as an alternate image, add as an element with an icon, add as an element with an image, or add as a link. I want to set this as an icon because I've already actually got my element there. So I'm going to set it as an icon. And you can see it goes up into that position by default. I'm going to resize this a little bit. And what I'm going to do is now go back into this and select some of the properties on it. So we've got the size, we've got the I can make it 16 by 16, a smaller icon there. I can make it up to 32 there. Let's leave it at that. We want to make it obvious, and I can change its position, top left if I want to. Let's leave it there, and let's do some padding. So this is the padding around the image that separates it from the border of the element. And let's say 4 pixel to, make it stand out. So that's another example there of using the custom style options to set the icon properties on it. And you can see that starting to look a lot different to your typical UML type of diagram, Scott.
Yeah, it looks much nicer. Can you have more than one icon and like have different icons for different meters? And so you might have a digital meter, and you might have a physical meter, and a coin operated meter, and
yeah, exactly right, Scott. And that would be a great thing to do, because there are situations in the street. Typically, the infrastructure people update the whole street. But if we were doing a suburb and looking at particular regions in there, we might have a set of streets that are still working on the old manual meters. Yeah. And so that's certainly an option to do that, and we can just import more images in there. And I encourage anyone in the audience who's thinking about using Enterprise Architect for your work, I encourage you to create some images and that represent your domain. It might be a parking meter domain, it might be solar panels, it might be an insurance company, it might be all sorts of things, but you will have a set of icons that your business people are familiar with, and you can import those in and do that. Now, Scott, I'm going to do something else which I really, really like in this tool, which is to change the transparency. So if you remember this second option here, I'm going to change it to 50%. And what you can see now is the transparency's changed, and you can see the underlying street underneath this. Yeah. So that's a very powerful thing to do. Let's do something else with a location. Let's create another location, but this one is going to be, we'll drag that one onto the diagram. And this location is going to be a car space. So that's what we want. Now, we don't actually want the car space itself, because what we want to do is, this is an instance model. So I'm going to, having created that, I could have dragged it straight into the project browser, but I just dragged it showing you on the diagram. I can do that. Now I'm going to just remove that from the diagram, but my car space is still there. I'm going to do what I always do in an object diagram, drag the element on, and I'll just position it over here for the minute, and I'm going to put it on as an instance. Yeah. And the car spaces that we want, let's say that we want to start with a car space in this particular region of the street. Let's start with a car space of 08. Right,
I noticed that graphic's a little different too. So you can clearly see that it's an instance rather than the car space itself.
That's right. And you can see that, Scott, because the UML defines the fact that the name of the element, if you see up here, properties, is called 08, but it is of type car space, seeing that was the thing that's classifying it. But we're getting into some UML weeds there, which are very interesting. But let's focus on this on this one here, and let's again drag this one over here. Let's make the car space a little bit smaller, and again let's apply some of our things to this. So let's make the let's look at the color of this guy, and let's look at making it this color, and we'll go in. That's a bit too bright, but we've got the option of customizing that color, and let's do that with it, and that makes it a bit softer. And again, let's change the transparency on that. So we can go in here, let's make that a rounded rectangle so it's not quite so sharp as well, and let's change the transparency to 50%. And again, you can start to see that there. I might change the border as well. That border kind of could be a bit more definite, so let's do that. And you can see the car space there has been created. So, Scott, we with this particular test, I've talked to the developers, and what they wanted to see was, 2 parking meters in relation to each other, and the car spaces that are in between the parking meter. And they were doing some market research. The business people and the operation team doing some research into how far parking meters should be apart. The distance between each parking meter, because I've certainly been to parking spaces, and I can see that there's some, numbers on the road, but I look around and I can't see a parking meter anywhere. And I think, well, I don't want to get fined. So that's what this test is about, to sort of see the relationship between the parking meters and the parking spaces. Now, Scott, I'm going to get you to perform some of your magic, and we'll finish this, use that magic to finish this diagram.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. That's great. You've done your magic, and now we can see that we've completed large parts of the model, and we've got 2 parking meters in there and a number of car spaces that are related to that. I can use my, zoom in there and use my pan and zoom window to zoom around that, and you can see that it's representing that. And that's enough test data for the developers to be conducting their tests and understanding some of the layout and geography of where the parking meters are positioned. I'm going to do one other thing, Scott. I'm just going to look at sessions. So the car space has got a number of sessions that are booked for it. Now, if I go into my class model, I can see here into my class model that I've got a parking session. I'm going to drag that onto the diagram, and remembering now, if I looked at that in the class model, it's got a particular presentation, and it's got some information there about start times and things. But if I drag that now onto this diagram, which has been, remember, we looked at our properties before for the diagram, and we can see that the custom style checkbox is checked. And so now if we drag the parking session into this one, and we drop it as an instance there, let's call this the sessions between, say, 0700 in the morning, which is generally when the council start charging you for parking, and let's do it till 10 a.m. and let's think about the kind of the sessions that we've got there. Now, let's apply it just to one car space. We don't need to do it to all of them. It's just to help the developers look at that. We're going to create a relationship there between, say, parking space 9 and this one. So that's there, and we can, line that one up and say, we'll center that there. So we've got that parking session. Let's look at what other things we can do with this custom style. So one of the things I can do is I can look at changing its shape. So I'm going to change it to a triangle. We've got polygons of all sorts of sizes, which are kind of useful when you're doing some particular types of work. I can change it to that triangle there. I can change it to, let's change it to a diamond. Makes kind of more sense. And let's change the shape of that a little bit as well, and we'll make it look like that. So actually, let's pop it back. That's a nice position. Let's again look at the color there. Again, we can use this one here to set the color, and let's set that in as that color there. And now, Scott, we're going to look at this stacks that we looked at there. You can see the diamond icon is showing up, showing that it's diamond there, and we can change the border, but we're going to change the stacks. We're going to say we want a number of stacks. Let's say 4, and look, we can change the direction as well and say we want it to be northeast or northwest. Let's go for southeast down there, and I'm going to change the border color as well to make that more obvious again. So
that gives a bit more depth, Stephen.
Yeah, and it also, Scott, the semantic value of this as well. It's got depth, but the semantic value is to show that this car space is going to have possibly multiple sessions over that time. Yeah, and so that's the session period there. So that's useful. One last thing, Scott, I want to show you is this feature that we didn't look at. This option was to set the border of the element. So conventionally, UML will have a solid border for most elements, but let's go, we want a dash border, and you can see that's changed the border of that element that's representing our street. Yeah, so that's it. That's kind of most of the important things with these diagrams, and I encourage people, that are looking at this to, one, create their own images we spoke about, but two, to think about the kind of places where you can use this, because sadly, Scott, I've seen in my own consulting practice, people using Enterprise Architect and having a belief that you can just create the standard like language diagrams, the UML diagrams, the Archimate diagrams, but this is actually a standard diagram. I'm just presenting it differently, and so I'm creating a different visualization, which is a very powerful thing for different audiences. And you can see that you don't need to go off to a drawing package, some some raster-based thing that hasn't got any of the connectivity. You can do it here right in the tool and create these fantastic diagrams.
And you can still have a technical view that you could show to your developers, and a business view that has images. And as you've shown, you can change your color, you can change the type of lines, all sorts of things. So like, that's pretty amazing that, you know, from the one model, you can have different views that cater for different audiences completely.
Yeah, and Scott, one last thing now that you've brought up that very important kind of aspect of the tool, I don't have to apply this to the entire diagram. I can select this as a deployment diagram, and it's got, we're using icons on there to display all sorts of things, which is useful. But I might want to look at this gateway and say, look, I want to change that into a custom view, and I can do that as well in this appearance thing here. I can say enable custom drawing style, and now I've got that drawing style, and I say, look, I want to change this into being for some reason, let's change it into a polygon, and let's make it 6 sides, and I can use it just in isolation on a single element as well.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Well, thank you very much for that. I'd like to remind our audience that you can click like, subscribe, and comment to any of the videos on the Sparx Systems YouTube channel. We love hearing from you, and it's great if you have any questions about some of the content you've seen today, or you have ideas for some future content, or if you just want to comment and let us know how you're enjoying these sessions. So we encourage you to like, subscribe, and comment, and look forward to seeing our audience at future YouTube videos. Stephen, thanks very much for showing us all the custom styles today. It's been fantastic.
Always a pleasure, Scott.
Thank you.